So the song Money, 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 All the Things I Could Do, I wanted to bring that in for this week's lesson, which is around the idea of adversity with respect to our finances. And that song kind of highlights that experience that we may find ourselves in. She works all night, she works all day to pay the bills she has to pay. That's too bad. How often do we find ourselves looking at our lives and judging that that's too bad? Where does that come from? How is it that we learned to assess things and to grade them in a negative way? That's too bad, it's so sad. How is it that we have accumulated these perspectives and accumulated these judgments? How is it that we pick these things up? Well, part of it is that the human mind tends to think in terms of stories. I really can't think of any stories when, if you don't have adversity, there's really no story. The whole notion is that things are going along. Something happens. And it isn't usually something happens, something wonderful arrives, and then things just get to be more wonderful. That's not usually how the story goes that we've heard about or that we've talked about. Has anyone ever seen the film The Gods Must Be Crazy? In the film The Gods Must Be Crazy, an airplane jet pilot is doing maneuvers, and he's had a Coke, and he throws the Coke bottle out, and it lands in the middle of the African desert, and a member of the tribe finds it. And this magical bottle is able to do all kinds of things that the tribe had never before imagined. So the capacity to be able to pound their vegetables down, it's just done that much more quickly. The ability to collect water, you can do that with a Coke bottle. The ability to look through it and see the shiny things. Suddenly, something that nobody ever saw, something that nobody ever needed, is able to do so much. And the problem is that everybody wants it. And one of the children takes the bottle and bangs another kid over the head. And with that, the tribal group gathers and they decide, we don't need this anymore. So they send one of their brave warriors out to get rid of this gift from the gods, who must be crazy to have given this gift. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. How is it that this little thing, this little Coke bottle, can bring so much calamity to a tribe that had previously coexisted in such peace, in such harmony? Well, there wasn't the story The Gods Must Be Crazy until the bottle landed. This piece of trash, as far as the pilot was concerned. Now, we all know better today. We're all much more conscientious about how we manage our material, our personal things. You know, we're in Seattle, so we're even so much more advanced that, you know, that bottle would go into glass recycling. And we have clear glass can go there, and we've got a place for plastic, and we've got a place for our compost, and we've got a place for all kinds of things. So we're so much more advanced. We don't ever have those kinds of issues. And I'm trying to use that as an illustration. Another story that I'm reflecting on that I want to bring into this is the story of Aladdin. Aladdin is someone who is, whereas the tribe was not really aware of any lack, they just did what they did, and then the bottle showed them easier, better, more efficient ways to do what they do. In Aladdin, he's very aware. It's painfully clear to him that he's a have-not. I say this because we live in a society which sends a message about having and having not. We have multi-trillion-dollar industries that prey on that sense of having not. There's people who get together and try to scheme how it is that this thing we've never had is something that we really want, and how we really must have it. And if we don't have it, our lives are going to be incomplete. So, each one of us has a little Aladdin living inside. How many of us find ourselves wanting a solution for the adversity that we're facing? How many of us, like the person in the song, come up with schemes about how it can happen? She'll find a guy who will have lots of money. A woman who has lots of money would work equally well. Aladdin actually runs into a princess, and a princess has it all. If she loves him enough, she'd be more than happy to share it. So whether he's a prince looking for a princess, or a prince looking for a prince, or a princess looking for a princess, one of the schemes may be that if we find somebody else, they may be able to make it for us. They may be able to help us get what it is that we want or need. But as the second verse starts, she realizes that person that she's imagining may not fancy her. So, the next plan is that they're going to win it in a game. Monaco. Las Vegas. How often do we treat prosperity like something that we can win or get in a game? In the story of Aladdin, it was this contest. Could he do this task? Could he fulfill this action? Could he get into this cave, this hidden cave filled with gold? Could he play this game that was set up for him? Let me read you something from Ernest Holmes. Here we may meet difficulties, uncertainties, doubts, barriers, walling our passage. His advice: be not discouraged when so confronted. Climb over the rocks of unbelief. Pass around the barriers of doubt. Plunge into the stream with faith. The stream will ever widen. The barriers will gradually disappear. Though we walk through the plains and valleys of indecision and doubt, the stream will still carry us back to the ocean of our being. In the midst of the cave that Aladdin finds, he finds a bottle with a genie. And what I propose is, rather than thinking of that bottle as a wish fulfiller, I'm saying that that bottle is who and what each of us are. That each of us has 3 opportunities to change ourselves. We just need to make ourselves conscious of it. How do we become more conscious? Well, in the story of Aladdin, he plans to use 2 of the 3 wishes, so that the 3rd wish is so that the genie himself can be free. What if we apply that same practice to ourselves? Oftentimes, we're in pursuit of what it is that's been set up as something we should have or something we should want. The idea of that wish fulfiller being set free, what if we were to have that kind of power? That capacity to fulfill our wishes is something that is free, is unbound, is not wrapped up in a bottle, is not wrapped up, is not held down, is not confined, is not limited by our wishes. One of the things that I was talking with Reverend Mykal yesterday about, a struggle for me about the topic of financial prosperity, is that the teacher Ernest Holmes and many of the people who are trying to share the ideas of Ernest Holmes come to this with a bias. Ernest Holmes was a white man, and he had something that he wouldn't have called it this, but he had these social supports. He had things that were in place. Many times people tell the story about how he came from a large family and they didn't have much. But the fact is that as a white man, he started out with much more. There were so many things that were put into place for him that were not by virtue of anything he did, but just simply that he was born into. Simply by virtue of a Y chromosome in his body, does he end up being identified as a boy and identified as a man. There's unearned privilege that happens. And I want to pull in that notion of unearned privilege as a feature. All of us here today in this room are of Caucasian background. Now we may have a variety of past national origins that generated who we are. But we can come forward in a world and we never have to say what those origins are. Those origins don't ever have to be called into question. That is an unearned privilege that each of us has. As women, as the women in this room, there are circumstances that have been held up against you. And that continue to be held up against you. That's an unearned bias. There's no reason that women should be paid a fraction of what men earn. And I'm bringing this into this conversation around how to respond to financial adversity, because I want us to use our conscious minds to bring this into awareness, that these unearned privileges and these unearned obstacles and unearned biases are there. I was saying to Reverend Mykal, I find it a little bit frustrating that so much of the science of my teaching just says, if you believe it, then you can achieve it. And it's a lovely notion. It's a lovely, empowering notion. And I just want to say that we are also in a society that acts and engages and moves in a way that is often unconscious. So I would say that one of the features of overcoming adversity is to be a spokesperson for what it is that we receive and what it is that we achieve, not necessarily through our own efforts. Success isn't simply about what we do. It isn't simply about what we believe. It isn't simply about how we are. It's also about the social context that we live in. So a factor that I'm wanting to add to the notion of overcoming financial adversity is to just declare what's going on in our social system. To just, it doesn't have to be strident. It doesn't have to be discordant. But we have the opportunity to speak up and to declare. To illustrate how this can be done, after the current person who's holding the office of the President for the United States, after that election, many women came together and they held one of the largest organized marches, one of the largest organized assemblies in history. And it was phenomenal in that it not only happened in D.C., but it was replicated all over the world. And I would say that that replication, that expression of declaring, of being, of showing up, was an example of overcoming adversity. Many people felt like they had to be in Washington, D.C. But for the people that didn't or couldn't get there, there were other ways to participate. I remember seeing pictures. There were people from Antarctica, from the station in Antarctica. That's not exactly easy travel, Antarctica to DC. It's not something that you can just do like that. There were people in Asia, in Europe, in Africa, all across the United States, in South America. There were people literally all over the world that got together. And if you paid attention to the Women's March, men also showed up. Men showed up to say, I'm with her. I'm in support of her. I'm wanting for her. Mykal and I had planned to participate in the rally that was happening in Seattle. However, Mykal at that time was actually in the hospital with his heart surgery. So while we couldn't physically be there, we could be there emotionally. I say this because I think that that's one of the wishes that we can act out like Aladdin. That sometimes we can see people standing up and declaring socially what's going on, and that it can be something different, and that we can participate in whatever way that is possible for us. The wish is saying, I want to be part of that. And the fulfillment is stepping out and doing it. Aladdin made another wish with respect to his social caste, his social position. He thought that if he were royal himself, that he could legitimately marry the princess of the land. Oftentimes, we think about making a change in ourselves. So for that second wish, the changes that I would propose involve being thankful for what it is that we already have. Another way of describing that is the process of stewardship. Petra Weldis, who pulled together ideas for the talks for people across the United States today, she identified the process of stewardship. The distinction between declaring that I want more, and then you get a credit card offer for 0% financing, and you take advantage of that credit card offer, and you declare that this is divine divinity showing up. This is how abundance is showing up, as this 0% financing. What she reminded people of is that this is really the bank offering to indebt us, to put us in debt to them. So that's not really abundance. It's a faux abundance. So rather than accepting faux abundance, how do we abundantly give thanks for what we already have? How do we care for what we already have? How do we revel in it rather than knocking what we have? In the song, she works all night, she works all day to pay the bills she's got to pay. Charlie, you talked about how you very deliberately set an intention that you would have your Charlie job. Your Charlie job that would be exactly what it is that you need, exactly what it is that you want. Setting those intentions around what it is that we desire, how it is we desire being in the world, helps to open us to that. I mean, that's one of the things that I always loved about the song. I mean, she knew that she wanted something different. And it's celebratory. It's major chords. It's not all minors. You don't hear the song and turn it off and feel depressed after hearing it. God, she didn't get what she... it's money, money, money. It's that what she's looking for has arisen. I mean, anybody who ever bought that album certainly contributed to the money, money, money that the ABBA team experienced. And people who have danced to that song, and people who have turned it on just to uplift, they're realizing that it doesn't end with finding somebody else who will pay for you for something. It doesn't end with going somewhere else and winning it. Part of it is about just identifying what it is that we long for. And how do we care for what we already have? So how do we find what we long for? How do we care for what we have? The third piece is how do we open ourselves to be more giving in the process that we're in. Now, in some ways, I don't even need to speak to it because each one of us is already doing that. Each one of us is already in a place of giving, already in a place of letting abundance flow through. Ernest Holmes wrote, "When a problem confronts us, take it into the silence of our consciousness. Instead of thinking of the problems, think of the answers. Spirit does not have problems, therefore the divine mind is the answer to every human problem. Principles never have problems. Problems are solved by bringing them under the control of principles. The problem is dissolved as the principles flows through them to the correct answers. Giving can mean giving up that fixation on problem. Giving can mean I have this little bit and I will give this little bit. There's a gospel story where someone comes into a temple and very ostentatiously makes a huge contribution. Later on in the story, a widow comes forward and she makes a very small donation. But the proportion of each of the contributions were radically different. The ostentatious person gave the smallest fraction of what it is that they had. And the widow, with her contribution, gave what would be called the lion's share, the greatest proportion of what she had. It's very easy for us to put ourselves in a position of just judging on appearances. And like I hope we gathered when I started the talk, the notion of those unconscious biases, that's what all that ostentation is about. Are we caught by the sights and the sounds of what comes forward to us? Or do we look deeper to the spirit within? One of the great things about this teaching is the value of abundance. We value the principle of abundance and its expression as prosperity is a means to provide resources to empower our personal and collective vision. Let us let abundance flow through us. Oftentimes we think that it's about abundance coming to us. The value with the science of mind is being that vessel, being that vehicle through which the divine comes into greater expression. If abundance just stops at us, it's like the first two ideas that she's come up with in the song. We find someone who's going to pay for everything. We're going to win a big game and we're going to be able to pay for everything.
Doesn't set the genie free.
Doesn't set the genie free. The last piece in the Aladdin story was, Aladdin set the genie free. We open ourselves to abundance and we let ourselves become that genie.
You had access to way more than 3 wishes then too.
Absolutely. And so it is.
And so it is. Very cool.